when hinges creak in doorless chambers, and strange and frightening sounds echo through the halls, whenever candlelights flicker where the air is deathly still, that is the time when ghosts are present, practicing their terror with ghoulish delight. Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion, Part 1. There are so many things about the original Haunted Mansion and the others throughout the world that I couldn't put it all in one episode. So remember, there are 999 happy haunts, but there's room for 1,000. Any volunteers? If you insist on lagging behind, you may not need to volunteer. When you think of Disney and his parks, most people think happy stories where happily ever after is the way it ends, and bright and singing characters abound helpfully, just like in his movies. But Walt was no stranger to the dark side. His first Silly Symphony cartoon was Skeleton Dance and was released in 1929. He knew that fear was one of humans' most basic emotions. That led to memorable Disney animated villains from the Queen in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella's wicked stepmother Lady Tremaine, to Peter Pan's Captain Hook and Maleficent in Sleeping Beauty. With these time-honored villains, Walt wouldn't have approached construction of Disneyland any other way. I got most of my delicious information from the book, The Haunted Mansion, From Magic Kingdom to the Movies by Jason Searle. And I have a special affinity for the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. It opened its haunted gates in 1969, 3 months after I was born. In the 50 years that I've been going to Disneyland, the question I get asked most is, what is your favorite ride? Usually my answer is pretty vague. Depends on the day, depends on how I'm feeling, depends on what's going around the park. But honestly, the Haunted Mansion is usually my go-to attraction. But I do have to admit, with an apology to all the fans, I'm not a fan of the Nightmare Before Christmas version. I like Haunted Mansion in its original form. Now, the origin of Haunted Mansion actually dates back to 1951, 4 years before Disneyland even opened. Imagineer Ken Anderson had sketched up the design for the Haunted Mansion. This was a rough pencil sketch of a decaying antebellum mansion, complete with overgrown landscape, sinister-looking trees dripping with Spanish moss, and bats circling in dark clouds above. Everyone was thrilled with this Haunted Mansion's look. Everyone except Walt. Even though the haunted house possessed an appropriately menacing appearance since Harper Goff's first sketch made in 1951, Walt did not like the idea of a broken-down plantation house, ruining his otherwise pristine look of Disneyland. This led to Walt's famous decree of, "We will take care of the outside and let the ghosts take care of the inside." After Disneyland opened on July 17th, 1955, it was kind of a rocky opening, but soon became a cultural institution. And it wasn't long before Walt knew he would have to expand the happiest place on earth to allow for the ever-increasing crowds. As part of the expansion, Walt resurrected his haunted house concept in 1957 and brought back Ken Anderson to the project. He'd already proved his ability to combine fear with enjoyment as one of the designers of most of the Fantasyland dark rides. The house site was originally planned for the southwest corner of Frontierland, but when they started work creating New Orleans Square, they realized it was a better fit over there. Even in the haunted housing market, location, location, location is an important decision. There were several stories written for the Haunted Mansion. One was The Legend of Captain Gore. This was written up by Ken Anderson. According to legend, an old sea captain disappeared under mysterious circumstances years earlier. The tour would begin in a picture gallery where a costumed servant met the guests, "Welcome to the Gold Gore Mansion," he would say. "I am Beauregard the butler. Of course, it's not what it was around 1810 when Captain Bartholomew brought his young bride here to live." In other drafts of the story, the character was known as Captain Gideon Gorlou, earning the nickname as Captain Gore thanks to his bloodthirsty reputation. When Beauregard gestures to the portrait of Captain Gore, a pair of hairy hands would emerge from the hidden panels in the wall and attempt to grab the butler, first of many illusions and special effects. In the next room, guests would encounter the ghost of Captain Gore's wife, Priscilla. The scenes were like window displays, and the guests would move from scene to scene, and the lights in the display would come on and then fade to black. The tour continues as guests watch Priscilla break into an old treasure chest that belonged to her husband, discovering to her horror that he was actually the notorious pirate Black Bart. She screams, and the room is plunged into pitch darkness. "No one knows what happened to Priscilla," Beauregard continues, "but she was never seen again. Alive, that is." It was believed that Captain Gore killed his young bride when she discovered his true identity and bricked her up in the cellar somewhere deep within the house. In subsequent drafts of the story, Priscilla's fate was different. In one version, the captain locked her body in a sea chest and threw the key down the well. In another, he threw her down the well. Either way, Priscilla's spirit tormented him every night until he took his own life. As guests leave the house, they pass by a crumbling old well. Scratched on a nearby wall was a clue to Mrs. Gore's fate. "Ding dong bell, Priscilla's in the well. Who threw her in? The wicked captain." Guests peering into the well would hear an ominous bubbling in the dark water far below, as Beauregard the butler offered a sinister parting thought about the color of the water. "Maybe it's the reflection of the sun, but by odd coincidence, it's blood red." In Ken Anderson's second version, a guide welcomes the guest to Bloodmere Mansion, a 100-year-old southern mansion that had been moved in its entirety to Disneyland to be the cornerstone of New Orleans Square. This is a lakeside estate of the unfortunate Blood family, who has had a tragic and bloody history of unlucky owners who died sudden and violent deaths, which resulted in their unhappy ghosts remaining behind to fulfill their uncompleted missions of their lives. Guests would be told, "We started work of restoration as soon as it arrived in Disneyland, but sure enough, the work each day was destroyed during the night. It mysteriously remains always night within the house, so we recommend that you stick together during your visit." Almost 6 months later, Ken came up with what was probably his most unique version of the story, with Walt Disney himself playing the role of the tour guide on tape. This time, guests make their way through the house and discover that its residents are assembling for an elaborate wedding celebration. As guests peer down one dimly lit corridor, they see the bride herself lose her head as her big day draws closer. "Don't worry," Walt would assure the guests. "She'll pull herself together before the wedding." The story definitely had a lighter tone than the tales of Captain Gore and Bloodmere Manor. Needless to say, before it was even completed, there were many stories that were created for this haunted house. When they finally had a story that everyone seemed to agree on, Walt had Ken and a team of fellow Imagineers take the concept from page to stage in a series of mock-ups that began in October of 1957. He recruited two top artists from his studios, Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie, for the project. Haunted Mansion is known as Gracie Manor for Yale Gracie. Walt knew that Raleigh's boyhood hobby had been magic, and the future Imagineer taught himself how to recreate some of the most incredible stage illusions. Although Disneyland was, and still is known, for state-of-the-art technology, many of the gags Raleigh and Yale developed were inspired by some of the grand illusions created by 19th century magicians, but they were always trying to take it a step further. Walt is quoted as saying, "There really is no secret to our approach. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors, and doing new things, because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. We're always exploring and experimenting. We call it Imagineering, the blending of creative imagination with technical know-how." One humorous side effect of their work, Yale had all the ghosts and magic strewn about the room. They got a call from personnel asking them to leave the lights on at night because the janitors did not want to come in if it was dark. Well, they did leave the lights on, but they rigged the room, putting an infrared beam that when tripped, the room went blacklight and all the ghost effects came on. When they came in the next morning, all the effects were running and there was a broom lying in the center of the room. Personnel called and said, "You'll have to clean your own room because the janitors won't go in there anymore." Now I have a funny theory that every guy has a percentage of 12-year-old behavior throughout his life. That percentage changes constantly, depending on the level of mischief they're causing. And I would assume that as an Imagineer, their percentage would almost always be pretty high. And for good reason. It makes for great stories. Well, I hope you enjoyed the beginning of The Haunted Mansion, and join me next week as we venture into the boundless realm of the supernatural. Thank you for the magic, Walt. Even for the magic that gives us the chills.